Hello everybody, this is John Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we are back with another of our 5-minute histories videos. And I have to start with an apology. Our last video, the shot tower, reached a terrible milestone. Our 5-minute histories video was over 10 minutes long. And I just checked, we're up to 60 some videos and exactly 0 have made it to the 5-minute mark. So today we are going to go much more lickety split and we're going to keep it short. I do though have to start by saying thank you to a gentleman named Rick Forgo, who has written a number of articles that are really wonderful articles on the history of Brooklyn that are online, and we'll put links to them at the end of this video. So here we are in Garrett Park in the Brooklyn community, south of the harbor. It was dedicated in 1924, named after a gentleman named Robert Garrett, and we'll get to Robert, but let's first start by talking about how Brooklyn got here as a neighborhood. It was in Anne Arundel County, started out as a farming community, wasn't annexed into Baltimore City until the Great Annexation of 1918. That's when we went from a city of about 30 square miles to a city of about 90 square miles. In the west, we annexed communities like Franklintown. In the east, we annexed communities like Highlandtown. And in the south, from Anne Arundel County, we annexed communities like here in Brooklyn and Curtis Bay and Fairfield. But before that, this was a farming community. It grew all sorts of crops until two farmers, a gentleman named John Cromwell and I think William Crisp, I think his first name was William, decided that they needed better access to markets, and particularly Baltimore and its wharves, to get their agricultural produce to market quicker. So they formed a land company, the Patapsco Land Company. They combined their farms, they bought up other farms, and they built a bridge. They built a bridge over to what would now be, we would call Federal Hill, and they were able to get all of their products much quicker to market. They also then had an idea that they could go into real estate development and that Brooklyn would become a bedroom community for Baltimore. After all, it had a bridge, so why not? So they started parceling off land and building houses. And hi, we got a motor scooter coming through here. Everybody's enjoying the park. And they didn't do very well at that. They were apparently much better farmers than they were land speculators. We'll say goodbye to our motor scooter. And they basically went belly up, and they sold to a group of private investors from Baltimore, and in particular a gentleman named William Pennington. And Pennington had the idea that Brooklyn could not become a bedroom community for Baltimore. What it needed was hubs of jobs, and then it could thrive. Pennington also just happened to want to start a shipyard. He wanted to build ships, so this was a good place for that. Although ironically, the first job hubs that were here were not shipyards. We had the Baltimore Wheel Company, made wheels. We had an oyster packing company over here, and we had a guana importer. In fact, Baltimore was one of the largest fertilizer importers in the world for several decades. And we also had Anne Arundel County's lax laws. Apparently, Anne Arundel County was notorious for its lax laws and not even enforcing the ones that they had. And so in addition to those industries, there were amusement parks and beaches that sprang up. And in addition to the amusement parks, some of them started hosting burlesque shows and liquor stores and even gambling. So we had Baltimoreans crossing over that bridge in droves to gamble and go to burlesque shows. But shipbuilding did take off, and in fact in World War II, the Bethlehem Steel Fairfield shipyards produced over 400 Liberty ships and Victory ships, more than any other shipyard in the country. So the dream came true. But that takes us then, let's jump to 1924. Robert Garrett is back in the scene. If you remember Robert Garrett, I think we talked about him. He was the Princeton athlete who went over to the first modern Olympics in 1896. He was from the Garrett family, the B&O Railroad Garrett family. And when he got to Athens, he realized that the discus and the shot put that he had been practicing with were way too heavy. And when he picked up the smaller ones after a few sort of wild shots, he ended up winning the gold medal in both of those events. events, won medals in the 1900 Paris Olympics, won more medals in the 1904 St. Louis Olympics, and by the 19-teens, he was the most decorated Olympian of the time and quite the celebrity. In the 19-teens, he bought up a parcel here in Brooklyn, intending to give it to Baltimore City as a park. He had become a champion of recreation facilities and parks and outdoor space and exercise. In fact, he was with the National YMCA board promoting those facilities, and he brought the Boy Scouts to Baltimore, again, with an outdoor theme. But if you say, hey, 1910s, Brooklyn wasn't annexed until 1918, so what was Robert doing trying to give a parcel of land in Anne Arundel County to the city? Well, apparently that was not too uncommon at the time, and in fact, if you've ever been to a wedding at the Cloisters on Falls Road that is squarely within Baltimore County, you may know that it is owned by Baltimore City, owned and operated by Baltimore City. It was a gift outside of the city boundaries. So in the 1910s, the Park Commission did not accept Robert's gift. They said they didn't want it, but by 1924 they did. One thing had changed in the intervening years, and that was that Robert became the head of the Park Commission. So maybe not too coincidental that they then changed their minds. But in 1924, this park was dedicated with great success. Thousands of people came. This was the first park in this part of the city. Patterson Park was there and Druid Hill Park, but this was the first one here south of the harbor, I believe. And people thronged to it. There were 6 swings. There was a jungle gym. There was a baseball diamond. Soccer teams formed to play. Outdoor concerts were held here. And the neighbors began to embrace it almost immediately and raised money for it. In the 1940s, there was an abandoned police station, and the neighbors raised money to turn it into a recreation center. The jail cells, by the way, were turned into game rooms. How cool was that? That was demolished to make way for I-895 as an access for the harbor tunnel. But the neighbors raised money to help build a new recreation center here after that. And in fact, some of the neighbors raised money to build a memorial in the 1950 to World War II soldiers who had died and were from Brooklyn and Curtis Bay and Fairfield. And today, the neighbors are still very much active in the park, keeping it clean. It is a beautiful park, a wonderful new play set up here, as well as a ball field still. And if you can look over my shoulder, you can see we're looking at downtown Baltimore. So I invite you, even in these COVID days, come on out, stroll around this park, maybe get some perspective on the Brooklyn neighborhood. And for sure, if you look out over the water, you'll get a new perspective on Baltimore. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.